What does she have to fear if she's telling the truth? Time and time again, she accuses him of doing something, which then when you hear the full context is an absolute nothing burger. TMZ has gotten its hands on that video, and you can hear Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni interacting as themselves, knowing that this is all on video and that this is going to be used to create this dance scene, and no such moment is shown. The only reason this whole thing got started, before she filed a lawsuit, she just went to the California Human Rights Office, is because she clearly cooperated with the New York Times to leak the whole thing.
All right, diving into some pretty intense stuff today. You know, the Jeffrey Epstein case, specifically looking at some newly unsealed court documents. And I know this is a sensitive topic.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of you are following it really closely, but we're going to be digging into those documents today and really looking at specifically some of the Hollywood connections.
Right, they were kind of coming out of it.
It is, yeah. These documents have definitely caused quite a stir. They're actually from a 2015 defamation case that Virginia Giuffre brought against Ghislaine Maxwell.
Okay.
And that case was actually settled back in 2017.
Oh, wow.
But a judge just recently decided to unseal these documents.
Okay, so for people who may not be familiar with the legal ins and outs here, why are unsealed documents from a defamation case such a big deal?
Well, you know, in a defamation case, both sides are trying to protect their reputations.
Right. And so a lot of sensitive information can come out during that legal process.
Yeah.
To encourage honesty and full disclosure, courts often allow certain documents to be filed under seal, meaning they're kept secret from the public.
Okay, so these documents were hidden from view for years.
Exactly. They were hidden for years, and then once the case is settled, a judge can decide to unseal those documents, making them accessible to the public.
Gotcha.
And that's what happened here. And now anyone can read them, and they're shedding light on some pretty shocking details about Epstein's social circles.
And there are some pretty big Hollywood names in here.
There are.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Cate Blanchett, Cameron Diaz, Bruce Willis, even Michael Jackson.
Yep, all in there.
I mean, it's pretty hard not to be intrigued by that, right?
It is. Those names definitely jump out at you, but it's important to remember that these names appear in the context of testimony from Johanna Stroberg, one of the women who has accused Epstein of abuse.
So Stroberg's testimony is really the key here.
It really is.
Okay.
She describes being recruited by Maxwell initially for a pretty mundane job answering phones.
Oh, yeah.
But things took a dark turn pretty quickly, and she alleges being pressured into sexual activities not only with Epstein, but with Prince Andrew as well.
Wow, that paints a very disturbing picture of what was going on.
It does. It's a really disturbing picture of the kind of environment that existed in Epstein's world.
Yeah, and it's in that environment that these Hollywood names pop up.
Right.
But I think it's important to clarify here that Stroberg doesn't claim to have actually met any of these stars in person.
That's right. She doesn't.
So how do their names even come into play?
Well, according to her testimony, while Stroberg was giving Epstein massages, he would often be on the phone name-dropping.
Oh, wow.
She said he would make comments like, "Oh, that was Leonardo," or "That was Cate Blanchett," almost as if he was flaunting these connections.
So almost like a power play.
Yeah.
To try to impress her or maybe even intimidate her
It's possible.
by just kind of casually dropping these names.
Yeah, it's certainly one interpretation. You know, it's possible he was deliberately creating this aura of power and influence around himself. You know, maybe to make himself seem more important or connected than he actually was.
But to be clear, Stroberg never actually confirms meeting any of these celebrities.
Right. In fact, she specifically says in the deposition that she would hope she would remember meeting such famous figures, implying she didn't.
Okay, so we're not dealing with direct accusations.
No.
But still, the fact that Epstein felt the need to drop these names even if they weren't actually present,
Yeah.
that says something.
It does. It speaks to a certain kind of manipulation, a way of using even just the suggestion of these high-profile connections to exert influence over others.
Right. It's a very subtle form of manipulation.
It is.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what the psychology is behind that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
was it all just calculated to impress and manipulate?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's certainly a possibility. You know, think about it from Stroberg's perspective. She's in this vulnerable position,
Yeah.
already feeling pressured and coerced.
Yeah.
And then Epstein throws these big names around, you know, as if to remind her of his power and influence.
Right. It's almost like saying, look at all these powerful people I know.
Exactly.
You better do what I say.
Exactly. It's a subtle form of intimidation, a way of reinforcing the power imbalance that already exists in that situation.
No, the Michael Jackson mention is a little different, right?
It is.
Because Joe Berg actually claims to have met him at Epstein's Palm Beach house,
Right.
although she denies ever giving him a massage.
That's right. The Michael Jackson connection is interesting because it's the only instance where Stroberg actually claims to have met one of the celebrities mentioned.
Okay.
However, the documents don't offer much detail beyond that.
So it just adds another layer of mystery to this whole thing.
It does, and it speaks to the broader issue of how much we still don't know about Epstein's world and the extent of his connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we're really just scratching the surface here.
That's a great way to put it. These unsealed documents are just a small window into a much larger and more complex story, and I think that's what continues to fascinate people about this case.
But focusing back on Stroberg's testimony, it's easy to get caught up in the celebrity aspect of it all.
Yeah.
But, her story goes far beyond just name dropping.
It does.
She's describing a pattern of coercion and abuse.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. The celebrity element might be what initially grabs our attention, but the real story here is about the abuse of power and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals.
It makes you wonder how many other stories like Stroberg's are out there
Right?
that haven't yet come to light.
That's a chilling thought, isn't it? And it speaks to the importance of continuing to investigate this case and others like it. We need to hold those who are responsible accountable, and we need to ensure that these kinds of abuses don't continue to happen.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
What can we as listeners kind of take away from all this?
Well, for one thing, I think it's important to remember that these unsealed documents are just one piece of the puzzle. There's still a lot we don't know, and it's crucial that we continue to seek out information from reliable sources and engage in thoughtful discussions about these issues.
So don't just take everything at face value. Do your own research and, think critically about the information you're consuming. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to remember that this case isn't just about a few high-profile individuals.
Right.
It's about the systems and structures that allow abuse to flourish.
So we need to be having conversations about power dynamics, about consent, about how to create a culture where these kinds of abuses aren't tolerated.
Absolutely. And those conversations need to happen at every level of society, from our personal relationships to our workplaces to our institutions.
It's not enough to just be outraged by these stories.
Right.
We need to be actively working to create a world where they don't happen anymore.
Absolutely.
It's like this whole case, and these documents really force us to confront some uncomfortable truth about, power and privilege and just the darker side of human nature.
Yeah. These documents provide a stark reminder that wealth and social status don't automatically equate to morality.
Right.
In fact, in some cases, they can be used as tools to manipulate and exploit others.
And that brings us back to that thought-provoking question we touched on earlier. What is the inclusion of these high-profile names, even without direct accusations?
Right.
Tell us about the broader context of power influence and social dynamics surrounding Epstein.
It's a question that lingers, isn't it?
It does.
I think it highlights the tendency we have as a society to sometimes turn a blind eye to the actions of those we perceive as powerful or influential.
It's like we're almost hesitant to believe that someone with that much wealth and fame and connections could be capable of doing such terrible things.
There's definitely an element of that, but it also speaks to the insidious nature of these kinds of abuses.
Right.
They often happen behind closed doors, within tight-knit circles where silence and secrecy are the norm.
And it can be so difficult for victims to come forward.
Absolutely.
Especially when they're facing someone with, vast resources and a powerful network of enablers.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to create a culture where victims feel empowered to speak up.
Right.
And where their voices are heard and believed. We need to dismantle the systems that protect abusers and hold those in positions of power accountable for their actions.
This deep dive has been a journey, to say the least.
It has.
We've uncovered some intriguing information, grappled with some unsettling questions, and hopefully sparked some critical thinking along the way.
It's been a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process, and we all have a role to play in ensuring that these kinds of abuses are brought to light and that those responsible are held accountable.
So to our listeners, we urge you, don't let this conversation end here.
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep demanding better.
Absolutely.
Remember, awareness is the first step towards change.